Hello and welcome to episode 249 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 1st of August 2018. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Marsh Davies.
Hello.
Alex Wiltshire.
Hello.
Tom Senior.
Hello.
And Captain Banter.
Captain Bants.
My liege.
So, we innocently went to buy a bottle of Captain Morgan's spiced rum, a traditional podcast drink, for this traditional podcast. Only to discover that it has a special edition label or something, which just sort of innocuously rebrands it and him as Captain Banter. I don't know how I feel about this at all.
They're trying to capitalise on like Love Island or something.
I guess so.
Cat Vance.
Adding to an unnerving beginning to this podcast as we made our, traditional honking noises to test the microphones, a man across the street started shouting honk as well. We don't know if he can still hear us.
Maybe he's Captain Banter, come to reclaim his prize.
It's like the Ring. So you open Captain
If he
Banter.
starts crawling out of the television.
That's almost video game news. We thought we didn't have any video game news, but did you guys see the VR Ring experience in which you can wear an AR headset and watch what's her name?
That's not right.
Sadako
climb out of the television.
It's not right.
And across the floor to you. I don't think.
Why though?
I don't know. Perhaps your pants were too clean. There's no real good reason to do something like that.
You've been constipated for a long time.
Is it full helmet you wear? Because that would be just sort of horrible because you'd be sitting there knowing that you've soiled yourself and be unable to do anything about it or know the sheer extent of the soils.
Are you arguing implicitly, Alex, that it is better to shit yourself with an AR headset on?
I don't know.
Microsoft's
Maybe it's better not to know. Oh, with the
you
AI,
would
so
know
you can see
either way.
through. Yeah, that's true.
Right? Like, I think it's probably the first thing human beings learn is, I've shit myself.
Well, maybe with an AR one, it does something to the soiledness because it recognises it.
Maybe. So is it this thing?
Maybe she crawls out of the soiledness.
You hold up an iPad over and watch the screen through the iPad, and then she crawls out of the telly into your iPad, and then by the time she's crawled out of your iPad, she's going to be quite small and easy to run away.
You just keep on getting smaller and smaller devices to trap her in.
That's right, yeah. So
it's one of those clamshell ones.
That's actually just a really good, like, this is like a Ring sequel for the kind of two-screen viewing experience world. Yeah, where it's just smaller and smaller. Like, eventually she climbs out of your Fitbit. And then that's a terrifying experience for borrowers.
Extremely pixelated and one colour.
Good. There really isn't any video game news.
That wasn't really news, was it?
I think maybe it's now been several months since we really made any effort to cover news on the podcast. So maybe your return, Marsh, is a good excuse in any just to say like death to news.
He's got the nod.
It's got the nod. There we go. Welcome back, Marsh.
Thank you
for one night only.
Indeed.
Yeah, well, I mean...
A brief appearance.
Did you sail any high seas with Captain Bants?
No, I didn't. No, I decided to go by plane. Thought that seemed more sensible.
It's fun at first, sailing the high seas with Captain Bants, but just after a while, you just want to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And he's like, mate! And you're like, oh, fuck. It's tiring. I completely sympathise.
Thank you.
Yeah, he doesn't know. He can't fly a plane. For really good reason. I've been on plenty of planes though with Captain Bants of some kind.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah, you get a lot of airline pilots who are like, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be leaving soon if we don't crash.
I once got the when I was flying first class once.
Yeah.
Obviously I didn't pay for the ticket, but I got the business card of the pilot with his personal phone number.
As in, like, call me.
I think everybody in that row got it. I was always tempted. What would
Casting
happen
his net wide.
I just phoned him up.
You
Like,
weren't meant to
I just,
call me.
Flew on your plane. It was really nice. Thanks very much.
I thought it was great. I thought we could get coffee. Just talk about things. Hey, I thought we had a great patter and, yeah.
Great.
I've flown first class exactly once as well, also not paying for it. Thanks, games industry. And I just ate a big roast beef dinner and drank until I fell asleep. Like a boozy heart disease baby. It was great. It was great. Good.
Good.
Well then. I see that the spirit of Captain Bants is truly with us. Yeah.
He's come into the room. Yeah.
We should talk about games, what we've played. Marsh, as you are returning onto this fold. I feel like you should deliver the mildest takes.
Well, it's good because I really only have very mild, very brief takes because I have been moving countries. The first leg of 2 country moves, so I haven't really had as much time to play games.
Yeah, you're on your way to America.
I am on my way to America. But before I moved to America, I did play lots and lots of God of War, and obviously that prevented me from playing any PC games. And then I packed up my PC and sold it for a very, very excruciatingly low price to somebody who I care about deeply, but wish I had charged more to. So I didn't get to play any PC games then. But I did play a bit of Chasm, which is a procedural Metroidvania game that's been in the works for 5 years. I think it was a Kickstarter. I think it was a Kickstarter in like the second wave of Kickstarters. Sort of like post Banner Saga Kickstarter. So it's been cooking for a very long time. It's got a beautiful pixel art style. Pixel art is exquisite.
Good goblins.
Good goblins. I think they're actually kobolds, technically, Alex. But yeah, they're pretty good.
You'd know.
And it's, it's quite boring so far, unfortunately. I don't know whether it's, going to blossom in some kind of exotic way later on, but it seems like the procedural generation thus far, it doesn't really add much to it. I mean, it's quite clever that they've been able to create a Metroidvania game. Because obviously, Metroidvania games are fairly principled in the ability to kind of sequentially unlock things and for that to feel kind of well-paced and interesting. So to put those different objectives randomly around a dungeon seems like that wouldn't work. Maybe it doesn't. I don't really know yet because I haven't got quite far enough in it. But
is everything procedural?
No, I don't think so. My suspicion is that
every atom.
Every kobold. My suspicion is that the rooms themselves are probably fairly handmade, or at least like platforming sections with them are handmade, and then the rooms are then juggled up. But honestly, the platforming challenges so far have been extremely facile, and the enemies I fought have been extremely boring. Like they're just path enemies, so they walk back and forth on a path. Even a kobold with a little drilling thing, he'll just walk up to you, then stop right next to you, and then turn around and walk back again. And you just have to hit him 3 times, and he doesn't attack you ever. He just walks into you. Right. And I understand the enemies get more complex. I fought one boss so far, but it just feels a little kind of bit bland. I'm hoping that on the basis of some other people's reviews that I've read of it, it becomes more interesting, but I don't know. I feel like the Metroidvania has reached its apogee at a certain point. There's lots of really good Metroidvania games out there, and they're so kind of flavorful, and they still feel so kind of well designed and precisely engineered, and the tools you have are so kind of exotic and interesting, and they transform your playthrough depending on which one. And this doesn't really have any of that. It just feels like sort of bog standard Metroidvania, but boring.
It's a shame. So when you say it's procedure generated, is it like generated once when you start the run?
Yes, there's a seed for each kind of run, and you can share seeds apparently. But I don't know quite what value there would be in that, or what replayability that really gives it.
I would say, it sounds like to me like with the most sort of generous hat on, which is a thing. That's a critical term that critics use. People
always talk about how good your generous hat looks, Chris.
Thanks. Thank you. It's been 249 episodes. Someone's finally pointed it out. That might be something that's specifically of interest to like speed running or something like that. That there's lots of sort of mature forms of enjoying a Metroidvania where it's about how quickly you can master it, or your kind of ability to kind of derive a fast solution that maybe that's catering to. This is my attempt to explain why you might generate it rather than just make one, right?
Yeah.
You might have a cell there to people who want to.
Yeah, I think, I was never a huge fan of Castlevania, so maybe, but I've always been a fan of Metroid. And I think maybe the meshing of those two genres, in the Metroidvania, is perhaps a little bit misleading, because maybe they have different things that appeal to different people, each of those kind of strands. And I think Castlevania is probably more of the enemies are fairly trivial, you can kill them with one hit sort of thing. Whereas I feel like Metroidvania feels more like Metroid rather feels more like world building in a way.
Yeah. I think, I was going to get to this because I'm going to talk about Dead Cells in this episode at some, but when I just, I've been, playing it for review because it's out very soon. It's been in early access for a while, but I'm much more comfortable comparing that game to Castlevania than Metroid.
Oh, really?
Because Castlevania is the combat game of the two.
Yeah.
Castlevania is the one with shitloads of different weapons and mad items.
It's
and
RPG systems
and all of this stuff. Metroid has combat and obviously good combat and boss fights and things. But your progression doesn't work in quite the same way. And once you've understood how to use a weapon, it always works that way. You're not picking up crazy new whips or anything.
Yeah.
You know? So I would say that, like, if it's not combat focused, that's fine in the Metroid tradition, but not necessarily in the other part of the Vania.
From what I've seen of it, it does look like it's taking on, like, sort of the combat seemed in Crawl seemed very, like,
Chasm.
to do the Chasm, sorry. It seemed to be the Castlevania style sword one, where a sword just pops out in front of you for a moment, and it seemed sort of that one. But obviously Castlevania has, like, huge depths beyond that. You know, that's just the start of the game thing. And maybe it's
just the start of Chasm. I hope it is.
How far deep did you get into that chasm?
Oh, not far at all, I don't think. I don't really know. I don't know how long the game is.
Elbow.
But yeah. Well, maybe a little more than elbow. Up to whatever this part of your arm is. I don't know.
Bicep,
yeah.
Good. How about you, Alex? What are you going to?
Well, I was thinking you might want to talk about Dead Cells next, because I'm going to also talk a bit Castlevania.
Okay.
Wow. Because I think Dead Cells and Chasm probably have more in common.
Okay. Well, so I've been playing a bunch of Dead Cells, and I think we've all talked about it at different points because it came out last year. Dead Cells is another procedurally generated sort of, it's not really a Metroidvania game. I'd contest that definition, but it definitely sits. Castlevania is definitely one of those big influences, as is Diablo and Dark Souls and Spelunky, I would say, which is a pretty heady mix of things, to combine. You basically embark on runs through this, sort of castle, fortress, gothic island thing, very much in the Castlevania mold, split up into different zones, where there is an ending that you're trying to get to, but you're probably not going to get there on your first run. And when you die, you go back to the beginning, and there are lots of different routes through the castle, so different zones lead to different other zones, and some of them branch. And some of that branching is based on upgrades that you've got, which is very Castlevania or Metroidvania-ish in terms of if you have the double jump or the ability to open this kind of door, you can then go to this place on subsequent runs. But it works very differently because none of that stuff technically bars your progress through the game. Some of it does, but you resolve that stuff very, very early. It's more about the potential choices you can make about the kind of run you're going to do, if that makes sense. So it's like, this time I'm going to aim for the clock tower, and that means requiring these kinds of upgrades and things. And so that's interesting. It's great, and it's chiefly great because the combat is amazing. It's sort of 2D, but I feel closer to Souls than, well, in some ways, like a hybrid of Castlevania and Souls. The thing that's Soulsy about it, apart from having a flask that refills your health that you have limited uses of, is a dodge roll that gives you an invincibility frame, which feels great.
It's very generous invincibility frame.
Yeah,
well,
you can use it in
really
midair.
cool.
There's lots of things. So you're combining like double jumps and ground slams and wall jumps with a midair dodge roll that feels real nice. Also, there are little things like, you have shields. One of your weapon types is a shield that has a parry window, sort of similar to kind of Dark Souls thing. It has Bloodborne's health regen mechanic, where when you take damage, your health bar just goes yellow, and then that yellow bit decays. But if you can do damage in the time, immediately after you take damage, and the time window is very, very tight, you'll get some of that health back. Not always all of it, but, you have that kind of like, I've just taken damage, but I wasn't necessarily punished for being aggressive, that kind of thing. That feels great. And there's a lot of just really fun weapons. So by default, you have no default attack. You have two weapons, one on X and one on Y on the Xbox pad, which is definitely a pad game. And two items which are on a cooldown. And so you might have spears and bows and shields and swords and things, but you also have grenades and turrets and turrets that stick to the ceiling and shoot at people, but only work when you're a certain radius of them, and spike traps that you can lay and things like that. And finding less stuff is random in every playthrough. And that stuff also gets like Diablo style modifiers, like causes corpses to explode or sets enemies on fire or does more damage to enemies that are on fire. So every time you play it, you are basically building a playstyle. And this all ties into a universal upgrade system where you collect cells, like as in globules, that you lose if you die, but if you can hold on to them to the end of a level, you can spend them on permanent upgrades. So this might be you find a blueprint for a new weapon, but until you've invested the right amount of souls, that weapon will not drop in future runs. So you continue to expand the arsenal of stuff that can drop for you, or you can get permanent upgrades to the amount of times you can use your health flask, and that kind of thing. There's a stat system which dictates how much type each weapon has a color affinity, and your points in that stat affect that and a bunch of other things as well.
The color affinity being
like the 3 stats. So
I see.
Like,
right.
And so it might be this is a red weapon, so you upgrade brawl, which is the red stat.
I'm with you.
And you do that by finding items around the environment, and there's also mutations, which you can pick 3 towards the start of a run, which include like, I want, a 50% cooldown reduction on grenades because this run feels like a grenadesy run, or I want a damage boost every time I kill an enemy, which makes you very good at killing hordes, but maybe a bit weaker against bosses and that kind of thing. And there's loads of good things about the system. I think the weakness of it, and I've been playing the game for a year, but coming to it in its kind of final form now that it's coming out, the thing that sort of strikes me about it is that like I really fell out with it, and I think we've all of us that have played it have had the experience of like playing it, and then hitting a brick wall and kind of bouncing off. And it's only in the last couple of days with it that I've kind of realized that it's really worth persevering with, because the reason the frustration sets in is because of the presence of a universal upgrade system. It's really easy to feel like the reason I'm struggling is because because that's quite a grind. Like if you dedicate yourself to getting a particular upgrade, the cost gets quite high. Like at the moment I'm looking at like 600 cells to upgrade my health vial to the next level. And I maybe like 100 in a run, but a run is like an hour of my time. So I'm like 6 hours to get the next one. That feels like ages. When you feel like the only thing that's going to get you to the next tier is a grindy upgrade, it's really easy to go like, whatever. And also because it's a bit like Diablo in that you can be really enjoying a playstyle. You've got weapons you really like and they really click together, and it's just fun to clear the levels. The combat feels so good. Enemies the sound design's great. It's got very good, I would say Vlambeer-ish, pixely minor slowdown, then something goes boomf, whatever that's called.
It's a big shower of gems.
Yeah, gems and
blood and
ichor, basically, when you just spank a dead man and it goes like, boomf, and you're like, fucking yes. That feels really good. And then to lose, like you get really, really deep and then you encounter a boss you've never seen before, and you will probably lose the first time you encounter each of the bosses. You're fucked. And you're not fucked in the Dark Souls way where it's like, oh, back to the bonfire. Time to maybe do a little run back to learn this boss, or a Castlevania thing, which is very similar. It's, I've got to start the entire game again, and I may never have those weapons ever again.
Oh.
Like, it's just over. And that's, like, quite powerfully negative.
It's a real gut punch.
It is. It's mean. It's mean to you.
But then the next run, suddenly you find two different weapons, and now they're the best thing in the whole world.
And so it asks you to deal with this, like, momentary, like, oh, fuck. And, like, I've definitely, like, full on quit. Like, okay, don't want to play this ever again. Great, back to main menu, back out, done. And then, like, do some dishes or something, and then go back upstairs and load it, and then play it again. Because that's kind of the game it is. And then discovering that, like, you start to think about, like, you have, like, your own meta game for, like, upgrades you think are really important. And then you get to the first boss, like, now, I remember the first boss being hard, and now it's, like, trivially easy. And the interesting thing is, because your core stats don't change at all run to run, like, you can get upgrades that mean things can drop. But apart from your ability to use your health potion a little bit more, there's nothing that's, like, you just have more health or anything like that. It's like a boss I used to find really hard. I started to find easy if I could get a certain loadout, and now I just find it easy. And there's no explanation for that other than the game's actually quite well balanced, and I've just gotten a lot better at it, which is the sign that the game is good, actually. Like, and there's so much cool stuff, like that. The crossbow, which initially, like, crossbows in RPGs or games like this tend to be quite lame because it's like the slow firing version of a bow. No one wants to fire slowly. Who wants to do that? And all they've done is decide that the crossbow's a shotgun. It's like, it describes itself slow firing, but fires 3 bolts at close range. And then you realize that they've gone to the extent of basically adding the Doom shotgun sound to it. Like, you activate the shotgun and it goes, poof, and like, you're barely pretending. But it feels great because it's so much stuff about it. It's just down to little bits of execution. But like when you press the fire button on the shotgun, it doesn't fire straight away, which is its slow firing thing. You hear the kind of it being cocked, which is the pretend like shotgun pump. and then it fires. It does shitloads of damage at close range. But in the window of time after you've activated it, you have full freedom about which direction you're looking in, and you'll continue to move. You lose control of your movement. If you are falling, you can no longer control the direction of a fall once you've started to fire it, but you can change your orientation. So you can set up lots of things where you like aim it, but then the enemy moves slightly and you spin around in the interval of time between pressing fire and actually firing, and then just like let this rip of, close range crossbow bolt go, and the enemy just goes blomp, and it's fucking great. It's really good. Really.
I like the way a lot of the upgrades, they're not like 5% extra.
No.
There are like 50% better cooldown. Like you feel upgrades. They're really good. Yeah,
you get like, there's a little goblin, that will let you like re-roll the upgrades on things. And cause there are some of them which are like, this one just does 100% more damage, but you take 100% more damage as a consequence. Do you want to try that? If not, you can try and re-roll it, get rid of it, but maybe it's worth it, etc., etc. And loads of, I think the final thing I'd say in its praise is it's really interesting the way its environments are constructed from like a Castlevania point of view, because it's this run thing. Because most Castlevania games or Metroidvania games, they assume a certain pace of exploration, right? We're talking about that. It's about pacing. You're like, I've discovered a new thing. Time to go back. This doesn't have that. This is time. I've discovered a new thing. That's interesting for the next time I do this. And each of its environments has, like quite a lot of secrets. Like there are things that are sort of, both enemies, but also like mechanics that only exist in certain areas that can conceal special routes or blueprints that you can only find by solving a particular puzzle in an environment. And that always encourages you to like do the Metroidvania thing of like stay in a place, dig out its secrets, figure out what you need to do in order to progress. Maybe you come back here when you've got the climbing or whatever it is. But there are also quite a lot of mechanics that encourage you to speedrun it. So it does both at the same time. There are doors in each of the zones after the first one, that lock a certain amount of time after your run begins. So the first one's in the second zone, it closes after 2 minutes. And initially that's like, when you're first playing the game, you'll never get there in 2 minutes. But now I can easily do that in about 1 minute and 10 seconds. So like, and then the next one closes after 8 minutes. The one after that closes after 15 minutes, and that's immediately after the first boss. And initially these things are just like, you do it for the first time and you're probably 40 minutes into the run and it says, this door closed 25 minutes ago. And you go, oh, okay. But then when you get better, you start to factor that into your run and you realize that that's a really efficient way of getting cells quickly, for example. And I find this super cool because this is something that I don't think even Spelunky does, where you go like, this run, I'm going to try and solve this puzzle in this world and I'll get a permanent upgrade from doing it. But in this run, I don't really have a plan. So I'm just going to go for it quickly. And I'm going to ignore lots of enemies and just do cool dodge rolls through environments and just get to the exit because I want to try and do this thing. And supporting lots of different speeds of play within the context of the same environment is a really, just from a design point of view, like a really cool layer to add to what it means to have a procedure generated environment. Like it's not just, it's different every time. It's like your relationship with it might be different every time.
And with all the different weapons, they all have their own play styles as well. Like it's basically, you can play totally different games between runs. It's up to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really good, Dead Cells. It's definitely like, not a sleeper hit because I think it was popular when it came out in early access almost a year ago, but it's,
It's weird. It feels like it's been out for much longer than a year. It feels like it's sort of one of those kind of games that have just been there for a long time now. Like I'm almost expecting to see the knockoffs already.
Yes. Yeah. It's very successful synthesis of a lot of things that a lot of other games are doing, which is maybe one of the reasons that like the art's lovely. Like it looks great.
Lots of really clever tricks as well with the art that they've done. Like, obviously they've done some normal mapping on stuff as well, but just the way they've handled gradients in the background, it's neat. There's lots of good art blogs by the art director of it on, I think, Gama Sutra or something like that. It's worth checking out.
It's notable for, I think, being a very colourful game that's nonetheless quite gloomy, which is not easy to pull off. Yeah. Like, it's really rich in colour. Like, it's very orange and lots of deep oranges and greens and blues and purples. And it's kind of brave enough to just do some levels in silhouette. You know, that kind of thing. Like, sort of, not fully, but like environments that are heavily shadowed and that kind of thing. But it never really loses its sense of like, here's just a really vibrant orange, purple, parallax scrolling backdrop that you're gonna lap up, you animals. Is what it says.
I like how brave they've been with it over time as well. They've really have gutted and changed and tweaked. Well, I'm trying to say more than tweaked. They've really changed a lot of the core systems in it over the year it's been out in early access, like the whole upgrade system. I don't even remember what I wrote about it. I wrote about the big change, but I can't.
Yeah,
like it's total. Different. Like, you know, and I was really surprised when they were describing it to me. Like, you're admitting making these huge changes. Like, they're like, they saw it as a live project and something that they were going to be learning from, and not afraid to really change things around despite having huge player base.
But it's almost like early access was legitimately.
Yeah, it was used properly.
Yeah, like a testing phase where the game changed.
This is another thing to observe about the company. They pay everybody equally, no matter what the role.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like they're experimenting with, the idea that everybody at the studio, no matter what they do, is paid equally. Very cool.
Egalite.
Yeah. French, you see, they are French, by the way. They are a French studio.
Yeah, Motion Twin is the name of the developer. It's very good. I like it. I like it. And I was wrong to get cross at it, but it is me.
Everyone should get cross with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what have you been playing, Alex? That's my Castlevania experience.
I've been playing La-Mulana 2. Which just came out 2 days ago. Has anyone played the La-Mulana?
What am it?
It is another, Castlevania, Metroidvania style, platformer.
It's the season for it.
Yeah.
This one's kind of a bit more storied, like it's a bit more kind of, has more history behind it. Like it's very much his own game. It is, Spelunky actually is based off a lot of its conventions, like is inspired by a lot of La-Mulana. I'm really having trouble with saying
When was the first game released then?
2005.
Oh, okay. Substantial time ago.
So it was inspired by very old, so like 1987 kind of era MSX games, made by a Japanese company called Nigaro. It is a dungeon crawler game, like a dungeon game in which you're going into ruins, and trying to figure out the mysteries therein, trying to penetrate deep into them. But before you are many puzzles and bosses and that sort of thing. It's a game that I think Dark Souls directly is inspired by. I think, it is filled with traps which kill you, and it is absolutely unapologetic about the fact that you'll stand on a switch and it will kill you.
Unapologetic. It makes no apology. It makes no apologies at all.
It's Captain Pan's fault.
Sorry, go on, Alex.
It'll just kill you, and so you have to learn from those mistakes. But then it's sort of you're playing on single screens. There's no scrolling, so when you go to the next sort of room, like it sort of flicks to the next one. You have a rudimentary map that shows you kind of where you are in the overall dungeon that's divided into areas. But the kind of the sort of fascinating thing about it is that it's got lots of puzzles, and the clues and the nature of the puzzles are hidden in text that you'll find. So you'll find bodies and kind of sort of not scrolls, but sort of plaques on the ground that will sort of give you a line of cryptic text which you'll need to interpret. Or sometimes they'll be in the level architecture and you'll see kind of logo or like images that you'll need to interpret. And some of them are really obscure. Some of them, like, I haven't got really very far in La-Mulana 2. In the first one, I don't think anyone has finished that game. I can't imagine it. I didn't get that far with it, and I probably played it for about 4 or 5 hours and just got really bogged down, stuck, and just sort of, it's in the way that a Metroidvania game gives you many avenues you could be going down, but then often it'll gate it very clearly. You know, like, you can't go here because the wall's too high, and you can see that there'll be an item that gets you there. In this one, you can see you're at a dead end and you have no idea whether you're meant to be able to get past it, and you're just not seeing the solution to the puzzle, or whether you're kind of, and this is a game where it is willfully trying to trick you all the time. So there'll be a thing saying, oh, make sure you whip these kind of engravings, like, Then
Got it.
you whip the engraving, and then there's an eye which has been sort of watching you. It's on one of the walls. Suddenly sparks electricity at you, and then you're dead. And it's a trick. It's a trickster game, and it's willful, and it's got this really nice atmosphere of kind of sort of willful kind of piss take, and like a lot of the writing is kind of very colloquial and sort of funny and silly. But actually the lore behind it is actually really sort of like bizarrely well built out, extensively built out, shall we say. Like, in the first game, you realize that kind of the world or the humanity or everything living on Earth is down to aliens having landed on Earth. And the temple that you're, investigating, is part of the aliens' plan about how to claim back humanity once it is developed enough to join them. And so like there's this kind of quite portentous sort of fantasy lore going underneath it behind this sort of breezy stuff. But it's and the second one is nicely the temple of the first game, which you've kind of gone into and apparently you destroy and kind of in solving the first game. In the second game, you go back to that temple, but now it's a tourist attraction. And you're going in there because monsters have kind of re-emerged, and you soon find that you're going to a new kind of alternative temple, which is access through it. But like there's something about it which is very like there's a lot about it which feels incredibly archaic. Like visually, it's kind of ugly, like I'd say. Like it's not a beautiful pixel art game, but it's definitely a style that's being gone for. Like it's sort of weirdly painterly. It can be difficult to see if a block is something that you can walk past or not. Like some of them are breakable and some of them you'll overlap in a way that suggests that it moves and other ones that it won't. It's very like, again, it's a tricky game like that. Like it doesn't kind of want to give you anything easily, like with consistency and things. So it's kind of ugly. The movement, I think, initially feels very weird and stiff. Like your jump is this weird sort of, very horizontal thing, but, with a kind of acceleration once you start to push in the direction when you're jumping. But you actually over time realize that it actually has a little nuance onto it, and you can actually cross spaces quite sort of naturally. It doesn't have any of the kind of beautiful parabolaring that you have in something like Spelunky. This game like is based on sort of 1980s Japanese kind of games, and therefore it has the kinds of physics that you saw in those, and it's definitely going for that. But the whip, for instance, the whip feels very kind of wooden. It's got a good sound to it, but then you realize there's like little nuances. So the way that Spelunky and when you crack the whip in Spelunky, you hit behind and above you slightly. Yeah. That's directly, that's in La-Mulana as well. Like there's little nuances with everything. I really enjoy it. Like you start to sort of feel out the puzzles and really get into this sort of trying to figure out the way the spaces kind of combine, like the way that you walk over some floor and then a trapdoor opens and you fall through to the next bit, and then there's some spike there and you kind of go, thank you very much, and you try to remember it for the next time. It's kind of...
How far do you get set back when you die?
It's a very Dark Soulsy sort of like there are save points and you can walk between the save points. So you've just got to remember to go back and save often, but often you are only going to be, it's a platformer game. So you can often get between spaces especially once you know your way very quickly. So you're talking about 5 minutes. Like it would be a reasonably punitive one. It's good. It's a good game.
The whole notion of the sort of misleading clues or the unreliable clues is super Dark Soulsy. Yeah. But kind of interesting. That system in Dark Souls feels more organic because those messages are from
players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, it's interesting, and it's also the same problem of do you or don't you trust the clue? But
these ones are usually from skeletons on the floor who are very clearly adventurers before you.
Yeah.
And
that is still the principle in Dark Souls, right? Where you see the blood stain on the ground and someone died here.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's playing off the same thing. Oh, there's another weird little convention in it where you get equipped with like a sort of little tablety thing, like a little handheld computer with which some characters will send you messages.
A phone, they call it, Alex.
But it's the vanilla, like it's actually like a sort of little kind of handheld thing. Like it's not, but you install software into it, which expands, like, so at the start you don't have a map, but then you get to buy, or I think you get given a map app, which you then have to go into the menu to switch on. And then that uses a certain amount of memory in your thing. There's a whole sort of this weird system. I've never gotten far enough into one of these games to see whether it's like this memory kind of thing is about you having to choose the ones you want to be running at any given time. But like, it's really weird. Like, it's just thematically, it's got nothing to do with going deep into kind of like ancient temples.
It's like in Breath of the Wild when Link gets an iPad.
But like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's sort of like, you know, it inspired that in some way. Like it is it's a game which has clearly got its fingers in all sorts of places, which have done probably better things. Like probably like, you know, they've taken elements of it and made better games out of them.
Right.
But like, you know, sort of objectively, like there's loads of stuff that's wrong with it, but together you kind of think, actually, this is really good fun.
How do you spell La-Mulana? La-Mulana?
It's L-A, and then a hyphen, then it's M-U-L-A-N-A.
Right. Link in the show notes.
Aye, Captain. Aye, Captain Bance.
Oh, God. Captain Banter just looks like he's going to try and, like, get your mate's phone number outside a wine bar. What a prick. Tom, what have you been up to?
I've been obsessively playing Yakuza 0.
Now on PC?
Now on PC. The first game to arrive on PC. It's a prequel.
Ever.
It's chronologically the first game in terms of where all the characters are at.
Right.
But there've been about 7 billion Yakuza games, and they're all being gradually remastered, or just otherwise renovated and released on PC over the coming years, it seems like. Well, Kiwami's coming out, I think, and you expect to see that trend continue. It's a third-person open-world action game that's also sort of an adventure game, really. It's a very talky game about gangsters doing violence on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's a kind of short game about short stories, ludicrous, absurdist short stories in otherwise serious gangster locations in Tokyo and Osaka. So you could, 1 minute, you're having a very intense showdown with Yakuza boss. The plot's genuinely excellent. Loads of gangster intrigue. It very much like, it does plot at you. You're never involved in dialogue options or anything like that. You're there to sort of watch a cool gangster flick for certain portions before going out into the open world and then going into Mahjong Parlor and playing a very, very well-made Mahjong simulator. You could play a game of shogi for money. You can run, as I have been doing obsessively, run a hostess club. And I spent all of Sunday making 1 billion yen from my hostess club, and then I poured all of it into my character's upgrades. So he kicks way better now than before he unleashed his business. And it's a game that takes such great joy in the culture of an inner city space. All the food is just meticulously described and feels authentic. You go to a whiskey bar and it's got like beautiful, authentically modelled whiskey bottles, accurately modelled for all of its whiskies. It's obsessed with these little things that make an urban space feel lived in and feel like a living place. And does it with like such a kind of clash of tones that is really exciting all the time. You can, one moment be very serious and then it could instantly be incredibly melodramatic. And then it could be a boss fight and then it could be, I'm on a sub-quest to buy a porn magazine for a small child.
Oh, that quest is so good. No, but it pulls it off.
Yeah.
It pulls it off. Like, yes.
That's kind of like the hostess stuff and that quest are kind of indicative of how Yakuza 0 and maybe the series as a whole kind of pulls this stuff off, where it does stuff that when you describe it to other people, they're like, what are you doing? What are you doing buying the small child a porn magazine in this game? But it's actually extremely funny and stupid. So it turns into a stealth game where Kiryu's so embarrassed about doing this that he has to evade the gaze of all the like people he sort of knows in the area. So like he'll be walking along, and then like someone from his work will suddenly turn up, and she'll then walk a patrol route around the area that you then have to dodge in order to get to this vending machine in this seedy back alley to buy this magazine. And then he hands it to the kid and says, "Put it under your bed." Oh no, he says, "You don't open this for another few years," and take some personal advice from me. Don't put it under your bed; it will be found.
But it somehow manages to find this kind of like sort of human warmth in that, which is like that he's acknowledging like this kid needs to be able to explore like the world, and like this is something that exists, and therefore who is he to say that, like deny that like to him, and like. It somehow manages to.
There's a bit in there where he's
make it work.
There's a bit where he's justifying it to himself, where Kiryu looks up and Plinky Plonky sad piano music plays, and he says, "I remember when adults always used to be jerks. I'm not going to be that adult jerk. I'm going to do what this kid wants me to do and make his life better." And it's so kind of knowing. Its characters are surprisingly warm considering they are like gangsters, and I kind of. It's hard to find stuff to compare it to because it's set in small open world locations, so city blocks that basically evolve throughout the series. This one's set in the 80s during the kind of massive financial rush, and it comments on this in loads of just slapstick ways. So whenever you punch someone in combat, money flies out of them, and all the game is just like everyone's steeped in cash all the time.
But there's also loads of homelessness, and like the streets are really scruffy.
Yeah, and it kind of captures this hedonism very, very well, and is actually socially aware in that way. You know what I mean? Like it looks like a big, stupid, punchy game a lot of the time, but it has something to say. It has something to parody, and the parody feels much smarter and more worthwhile and culturally interesting than, say, Grand Theft Auto, for example.
Because GTA was going to be the comparison I was going to ask about.
Yeah, because
GTA is also a crime sim with wide tonal variance and a sense of humor, like that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Like, is the difference simply the humanity?
It's partly that, but I think it's more that it's rooted, so loads of stuff that GTA does is rooted in cinema portrayals of stuff, whereas loads of stuff that in Yakuza is just rooted in life in inner city Japan in this period. So like the hostess clubs are a thing there, and that's like it feels like it's commenting on a thing that really happens in an interesting way. Whereas GTA's equivalent would just be a parody of a heist movie, which isn't speaking to.
Well, it'll do a scene in a GTA will do a scene in a kind of in a strip club,
right?
But it will never it doesn't feel like it cares about like what a strip club is. It's just, this is where gangsters do stuff. Whereas in Yakuza, like, you're going to run one and you're going to know what women do in these places. And it is like a little bit lascivious about it. And like, you are exploiting these women, and it tries to dig you out of that by having people who are like, use the women worse in other ones that you're compete, who are the bad guys. But by actually treating it as a real place with a function and a kind of like a very believable function within a city, like a kind of very credibly drawn city, it's saying you can kind of make up your own mind.
I suppose it's the sense that like this is a depiction, like obviously a highly fictionalized and arcadey version of inner city Japan made by people who have who really know those places. That sounds like the vibe. Because I guess, like, I've been trying to articulate over the years the different ways in which I've kind of gone off Rockstar writing and Rockstar world design, but I think it's fair to say that, like, Rockstar don't make games about the places where Rockstar games are made. At all. Right? Yeah. Like, Grand Theft Auto isn't about
Edinburgh.
You know? And, like, it's always going to be at a remove, and it's a cinematic idea of America specifically and that kind of thing.
And I think, well, Yakuza is warm towards him, like it likes people.
Right.
And Grand Theft Auto hates people. Like, that those games are, everybody is corrupt horrible, nasty people. Like, are there any sympathetic characters in Grand Theft Auto? I'm not sure.
There is, I may have said this on the podcast before, but it pisses me off. It still pisses me off. I don't know if it was the same writing team, but there's a brief moment where Grand Theft Auto played with the idea of having more sympathetic characters, and it's the Lost and the Damned expansion for Grand Theft Auto 4.
Yeah.
With the biker gang who, like, that whole story is kind of people who care about each other trying to do the right thing, and it's obviously got crime tragedy in it, but it's quite positive about people and about people kind of coming together to look after each other. And it clearly is,
it's not as fun though, is it?
I like that a lot.
You like it?
No, the thing that pisses me off to this day is how those characters are used in Grand Theft Auto 5.
Oh yeah, that's
because they all reappear in Grand Theft Auto 5, specifically in Trevor's introduction mission. So Trevor is the kind of hillbilly psycho in Grand Theft Auto 5. And I don't even want to say out loud the stuff that happens in his intro, but it's basically just...
it feels very much like debt settling amongst different producers within the Rockstar
He basically
Studios.
abuses and murders all of the likable characters from the Lost and Damned in his first mission.
Christ.
Like, it opens with horrible things happening, but then it opens with him brutally and graphically curb stomping to death the likable protagonist of the Lost and Damned.
Oh, Christ.
Like, and it's clearly this, again, it goes back to that hatred.
We're not getting that anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Going back to hate.
No more of this.
Yeah.
Back to, that's the reason I hate Grand Theft Auto 5, but like, you know.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
Yakuza, like, likes people. Like, it has some nasty characters in it, but like, in general, they're, you know, even some characters that initially come across as really nasty, like, you realize really, actually, you know, you get to see other sides of them, or you get to sympathize with them.
Yeah, the actual sort of the crime bosses themselves, these just extraordinarily drawn caricatures initially. Like the way they look is just incredible, and obviously they've paid obsessive amounts of attention to detail to the tattoos specifically, and the type of clothing that different levels of Yakuza wear. And when you actually sort of get to know them, they're all playing this. It's all great crime stories are like this. They're all playing this game where they're locked into it and they're trying to outsmart one another. And they're very clever people, even though they've pursued very gross lines of work. And there are codes of honor within these structures, even though they're doing terrible things to people. And just existing within that as a sort of floating character is really fascinating and it's great food for stories. You actually play as two characters in Yakuza 0. And they live in different places. So one lives in Osaka and one lives in Tokyo. And one of them is an established, club owner. And if you want to understand the sort of conflicting tones of Yakuza 0, you go onto YouTube and watch Majima's intro sequence. The way the game introduces you to this character is absolutely extraordinary and very, very funny. It instantly makes him likable.
Yeah.
He's in his beautiful, opulent club, and he's dealing with an asshole, and just a total asshole who's just a customer who's like abusing the women at the table, and he treats him with like painfully aggressive courtesy, and with a kind of spectacular dancing manner that earns him the respect and adoration of everyone else in the club who realises that this guy's an asshole. And the way he sort of shows him up and like holds off on violence for so long is just an outstanding piece of character introduction, and just extremely entertaining at the same time. It's good stuff.
So this is chronologically the first game within the fiction.
Yes. Yeah.
But so do you, having played other Yakuzas, do you know what happens to these characters, and does that matter?
So I haven't. I'm told by Phil Savage, who's played a lot of the series, that there's a lot of kind of tragic irony at work for some of the characters that you encounter. And so Kiryu is the series protagonist. He's one of the two people you play in Zero, so he's the guy who will always be there. And he suffers a little bit in this game from being his kind of setup story that kind of sets him up for the person he then becomes. Whereas Majima, who's more of a side character in other games, is his own game in this, and he's already really well established. They sort of use that to give you something to latch onto while you're being introduced to this other series. So yeah, the story in Yakuza 0, the central conceit is something called the Empty Lot, which is a 3-meter square piece of shit alleyway, that nonetheless is like the key to a massive land deal, and it becomes that massive crime gangs across Japan are fighting for. And it spins this wonderful kind of this wonderful web of intrigue and deceit and murder out from this innocuous piece of crap land, which in itself is a comment on like 1980s property ownership and how that turns into corruption, it doesn't matter what the thing is. that it's almost that humans will find a way to corrupt anything and go to war over the smallest, most innocuous thing. And that's a fucking cool story.
Yeah.
It's written characters as well.
And through that, you learn about Japanese property law, and you also learn about like the state of
wow, that's what I've always been wanting from a game.
Chinese immigrants of the time. Like it's really interesting. Like I
yeah.
didn't know anything about like the place of Chinese immigrants in Japanese cities at the time. Like it's fascinating.
Really,
and like
really interesting.
loads of really fine detail, and then suddenly you go outside, like being hunted down by some other Yakuza gang, you having to take a side quest, by just chatting to somebody who wants to talk to you in the street. And then you end up, taking part in a Michael Jackson video in which, you have to fight off zombies, or at least people playing zombies, as Michael Jackson danced down a street. And like, so it basically you use it. It doesn't have many mechanics. Like basically there's one mechanic, well, two mechanics. One, which is running from place to place. And the other is punching. And so like basically it manages to use that in the most like delightful way.
Yeah.
But like one of my favorite things about it is how it gets big fist fights into the game, like whenever it can. So you will have these big scenes and it has to think, oh, you haven't had a fight for a while. And that was quite a climactic moment. This moment where you went to a big crime boss and managed to do a deal with him. So you're friends with him now, but we need a fight. So I know he leaves his office and he has all his men fight him anyway. Yep, we'll do that. Yep. And then so starts a 15-minute long brawl that like rolls through this huge, great Yakuza headquarters out into the beautiful Japanese gardens. He picks up like benches and kind of like sort of fonts, like stuff in the garden, smashes over people's head out the gate and like bam, gun. Best friends now, but like he has smashed up everything and beaten up all his men. So good.
Yeah, it's got a great sense of humour, and I think it's been seems to have been translated very well. Like it seems like the characterisation has survived all the localisation, and but the voice acting is really good in it as well. Like as far as I can tell, and obviously I don't understand the language, but you get a tremendous sense of gravitas from those exchanges. It's really, I love it. I really love it. I say that about every game I've been on the podcast recently, but I've played so many games I loved recently, and this has been a huge surprise. And it feels like starting an awesome novel series because there's so much more Yakuza to play.
Yeah.
And all of it coming to PCs?
I don't know. It's all available on, like, I think a lot of them are PS3 games, and
right.
I don't know, like what the timeline might be, but
it'll take a while, I imagine.
Yeah, there's loads of them.
But
isn't one of them set in like feudal Japan? Isn't there a Yakuza?
There is one of those. Apparently that's like probably never going to come.
Right.
But yeah, there's an obscure one where it is set in the past. I don't know how that is possibly going to work. But yeah. Yakuza 0 is awesome. Watch Goro Majima's intro. That's a good show notes thing to link, I think. So that'll tell you a lot about the game.
Oh, and also where he learns new fight moves.
Oh yeah.
And he just sees somebody. Goro Majima has this, learns like one of his fighting styles is breakdancing.
Yeah.
Like capoeira kind of thing, or just breakdancing?
Breakdancing, yeah. And he, and when he learns this, he sees someone breakdancing and go, like, cause he's good at fighting. Oh, I see the opportunity. He just goes, the camera zooms into his face and he goes, holy shit! So good.
When it happens to Kiryu, like it does exactly the same crash scene on him as well, except he goes, that's rad.
Oh man, I really want to play this now.
And it might just be like a drunk man falling over and he's like, that's rad. Now I know how to fight a completely different style. One of my 3 styles has been unlocked.
Oh yeah, and then there's all the side things. There's, like, we haven't even talked about like the fact that there's a singing mini game, there's a dancing mini game, which is a really good dancing mini game, where these incredibly taciturn Yakuza people you've been playing, who are like usually like sort of like expressionless, like strong people. And they just go onto the dance thing and start this incredibly flamboyant dancing. It's so good. There's like, loads of Japanese dice games, like so many different types of Japanese street dice games for gambling games. Like, and there's, mahjong, there's you can watch, there's some pretty gross stuff in it.
There is, yeah.
You can go and watch kind of soft porn.
I've not done that yet, but there's a building for that.
Yeah. But that's not very nice. And there are all these calling cards that you pick up.
That's true.
There's some seamy shit in it, but like somehow it manages to transcend all that.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something in just if it's sort of like relatively kind-hearted and funny the rest of the time, it can survive some of that stuff. If it doesn't feel, I don't know.
Well, again, the Grand Theft Auto example is like women in Grand Theft Auto do not come across well. Like they are treated as victims or kind
Harridans.
of bitches.
Yeah.
And like, again, like, because Yakuza likes people.
And the comparison I would make there is Saints Row, where Saints Row, like the latter ones, like when it kind of learns its lesson about not trying too hard to be GTA, and it's sort of like, it also has a lot of like pretty kind of, there's a lot of, sort of TNA stuff in Saints Row and a lot of kind of prurient stuff. But because it's so, I'm thinking specifically of Saints Row 3 and 4, but like, because it's so, Saints Row really likes people as well. Like that's its quality. I don't know bang on how much I love 4 particularly for that. But it kind of gets away with it for me because it is sort of, it just comes across as kind of daft and celebratory and overall positive rather than like it's trying to necessarily like condemn a certain type of person or a certain type of life or anything like that. I don't know if that's a similar comparison. I know
Kind
it's
of, yeah. And it's also like,
Saints Row.
it's kind of, there's this character that goes around just in a pair of underpants who's like a complete pervert and like, and whenever he pops up, your character says, go away, you're just a freak, just keep away.
Have you met the guy who is going around stealing people's trousers? He demands your trousers and then you have to fight him and he's a really tough fight. It's really fucking difficult.
Does he take away your trousers if you lose?
I didn't lose. I should have. And then they have like a big long heart to heart about why he's stealing trousers. And at the end it's like, so you're going to change your ways? It's like, fuck it, no. And apparently he's going to be like a roaming mini-boss now. That's the other thing, there are roaming mini-bosses, and there's a guy called Mr. Shakedown.
Yeah.
And whenever you see him, he's like built like a brick shit house. He's like the size of the Hulk, and he's got a massive, like, a number above his head. That's how much cash he's carrying at any given point. And if he sees you, he just like marches very slowly, like slightly quicker towards you, and you get into a fight, and if he beats you, he steals all of your money. But so when you see him at the start of the game, you just fucking run whenever you see him, and it keeps track of where he is at any given point on the minimap.
Amazing.
Where Mr. Shakedown is. So it's like, oh, I was going to turn left to play some Mario. Mr. Shakedown is fucking in this area, so I'm going to go the other way and I'm going to play some shogi instead. And except, as you get better at combat, the tables eventually turn, and it turns out that number above his head is just, bait. It's like, I could go take him down, but each time you beat him, he gets tougher and tougher. And it's just irrelevant to anything else in the game. The game's full of these just self-contained, jokey, fun things. And because I love the idea of games that double down on a small space, but make it detailed and let it evolve. And like Dragon Age 2 does that. But this game does that with just so much kind of love and dedication to recreating this type of place at this type of time, at this particular time. That it's a pleasure to sink into it and spend like 100 hours there, which is it's a big game.
Sounds great.
It's good.
Is that out now?
It's either today or tomorrow, I think.
Damn, this is a difficult weekend to figure out, or a difficult couple of weeks to figure out what big open world games coming to the PC for the first time.
Yeah, Monster Hunter is out.
Yeah, end of next week or the week after. Yeah,
nice. I've already played that for 100 hours.
Yeah, well, is it? It's Monster Hunter Ultimate.
It's Monster Hunter World.
Right, yeah.
Hang on, which one is that? Is the one...
It's the most recent one, but it's the first one to come to PC.
Oh.
Dang. It's good. Could play it all over again.
Should we do some questions from questions, as a wise man once said?
I can't think of anything better.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. But let's do questions and questions anyway.
Our first up question... Fucked it up already. Comes from Veer Serif, who writes, Dear Kratos Crowbars. Little hint here. Since it keeps popping up on the pod, please use this question to talk consoles. What are some of the most memorable console exclusives, whether because the game was good or interestingly bad, that you've played recently? It's from Veer Serif.
Oh, I've been playing Uncharted 2. I've been playing the remaster, which is really good. Even now. It's quite old now, isn't it? 2010? 2009?
Who
Something
knows?
like that?
Nobody could possibly know the answer to this.
The very sands of time have not dulled its burnish.
I thought you were going to say it was like Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, which it is a bit. But it's not that, is it?
It's not that. It's good.
Okay.
It's not. It's that. It's like it has this wonderful pace to it where it just rolls along and like the story happens and scrapes
caper,
ahead.
isn't it?
It's a real
It's a
caper.
rollicking ride.
It's a rollicking ride. I was surprised because I actually found my copy of Uncharted 3 for PS3 maybe a year ago, put it into my old PS3 to play it, and felt surprisingly kind of stiff and weird, because I've been playing for Christopher.
I'm sorry, Alex. You keep wandering into these situations.
I'd been playing Uncharted 4 and that makes movement so fluid and it looks so beautiful, and it was all a bit of a shock to go back to play at PS3 as well. But the remaster of Uncharted 2 is really rather good, and I enjoyed it. And I think they might have brushed up a few bits that were kind of like sticky points, because I remember there was a river... Christopher.
That was because of Marsh. I didn't say anything, and then Marsh looked at me. He said sticky, didn't he, kind of way. And then I laughed, and then you
This is
laughed.
half the English language you've now barred me
I
from.
think that like 50% of it is wanking.
There's a river scene in the city. No, there's a city bit, and there's a river scene where you got to cross it, and I seem to remember getting stuck on it because you're getting fired at for ages beforehand. But this time, went straight across. It was wonderful. Anyway, Uncharted 2, good, still, console game.
Good.
Excellent, yeah. Uncharted 2, best Uncharted game.
Might be.
I think.
Yeah. I don't remember 3 well enough to be able to...
It's a bit of a slog, I seem to remember 3.
Yeah.
And then, I like the last one a lot, although it's very self-indulgent. It's so kind of aware of the heavy weight of the series that it's carrying, and it tries to do a little too much, but it does really tie it off in a nice bow. I was very close to a masturbation
Tie it off.
metaphor.
Is that
I don't think so. I think we can say tie
They
it
really
off.
pulled it off.
They really pulled it off. Yeah.
You've been playing a lot of God of War.
I have been playing an awful lot of God of War, too much God of War. I really, really loved God of War for about 10 hours. And then it carries on for what seems like another 50 or 60 hours. I don't quite know how long a game it is. But by the end of it, after you've fought bad guys which are identical to each other but have different colours, and really have picked up no good at armour or weapons for a substantial amount of time, it does feel a bit of a...
How did you
Bit of a
feel
grind.
about being promised you're going to go through to the final bit and then...
Oh God, it happens. There's so many times you're denied the kind of closure of the story. Obviously it has this kind of real nice driving purpose to the entire plot, which is set out immediately from the very beginning of the game. And you keep on getting promised that you're going to go to this place, and then the place changes, and then you almost...
Oh, sorry, we're closed on Tuesday.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it is as frustrating as that. It's just, and you're just, oh, come on. And you're only going back to other places you've already been to a bunch of times. It's just, I don't know. I felt like they had an amazing 10-hour game, and they made the mistake of stretching it out. And I think it doesn't do any of the systems any good. Like the combat is so tight and in the first few hours, and then the more powers you get, at least I found that I was relying on these fairly cheap powers, which are sort of like, spamming area of effect things and, essentially waiting for those cooldowns to kind of tick back up before I re-engaged, rather than actually using any of the kind of the movement or the dodging or the parries. And it feels like, the game just kind of loses a sense of what it's trying to be in an attempt to extend itself. But, it's amazing. I did it again. But it's an astonishingly beautiful game, and I was fully on board with the whole Dad of War reimagining of it.
Yeah.
And who would have ever thought that they could have made Kratos into a credible character of any kind?
Yeah.
Unbelievable, isn't it? One
Yeah.
hell of a turnaround.
Yeah.
Sure.
A real transformation. And all the voice acting is stellar. All the performances are amazing. Some amazing side characters.
Beautiful interpretations of Norse myth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, in the past, those games have just been essentially completely illiterate. with their regards to mythology. Like David Jaff obviously just, saw some kind of titsy picture of a harpy once, says, I'll put that in a game. Yeah, rip its wings off. Oh. And now the way it's dealing with Norse mythology is incredibly sensitive, but it's also very clever about the way it's reinterpreting the gods as being essentially amoral, which they are. They're always depicted as amoral throughout, all these kind of pantheistic gods. They're all just humans writ large with terrible, terrible flaws out for themselves. And it really deals with that in quite a clever way. And Kratos is, instead of just lining up all of these kind of big beasts from mythology just so you can punch them, it's setting out why the gods are hateful. They're essentially completely amoral beings who have all this power and don't treat people well with it, and that's, and the Kratos' cynicism towards them is really well founded in this. And it's, fair enough. Like, if you were to play, like, God of War, any of the preceding ones in front of somebody who's game naive, God of War epitomizes everything that they think games are and probably hate. And this one is just incredibly smart in a lot of ways.
I played in front of my mum and she was kind of not she did seem to have her assumptions about what games are fairly well served back to her, which was basically punching people, smashing their heads on rocks.
Yeah, I tried to time it so that whenever my girlfriend saw it, it was during one of the cutscenes where he's being nice to his son, rather than when he's pickaxing somebody in half and then ripping their two halves apart in a shower of gore.
But Mum, it's really good. Look, we're going on a boat ride.
He's really woke
He's going to tell us about the myths.
It's definitely kept to the series' sense of scale. There've always been games about being a tiny speck on the back of a god-sized beast, and when you meet just the colossal,
the world serpent.
Yeah, I just want to
Jormungandr.
Talk to that world serpent all the time. I wanted to read me bedtime stories. It's amazing.
It's a great bit of sound design, and it's one of the few times where a pad rumble synchronizing with the noise creates a kind of a sense of a titan speaking in this kind of alternative tone. It's a fantastic moment. I think it's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it really is. I want to go back to it as well now.
Yeah. Any other console games anyone's been playing? I dipped back into Persona 5, and I've never been so disoriented upon revisiting an RPG. When you sort of take a massive hiatus, and I just open up in some underground subway. I was like, I've literally no idea who this person is that I'm controlling or what sort of stage of the plot I'm in, even though I loved Persona 5, sunk 100 hours into it. So I'm going to try and leverage my way back into that bit by bit. All games should have summaries, catch-up summaries of what's going on. Just need to find the notebook in Persona 5 that tells me who I am.
Why are we on the subway? Whose mind are we in?
Yeah.
I haven't played a console game in ages. Genuinely ages. I think the last thing I was playing regularly was Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah,
it's pretty good. Mostly in the fact that it just sort of feeds back to, Firaxis and Julian Gollop's new company that XCOM needed a jump. It needs the ability to throw your mates at other mates.
That game's
set up rallies.
Super awesome until a very specific point where the battle zones instantly become too big for the game, and it's really disorienting. And then from that moment onwards, the game was broken for me. But there's a beautiful sort of first 8 hours to it.
And it sort of proves that you can apply, there's two different formulas that work with everything. One is XCOM, weirdly, and the other is the sort of Mario hub world with unlockable spokes from getting stars. And my kind of takeaway from that is that either of those ideas can be applied to any game, and it's probably better for it. If you're sort of, Deus Ex, you should be collecting big glowy stars in every level that unlocks the next cyberpunk dystopia from the hub area, right? Whatever, David Serra's bedroom, whatever.
Whatever, Princess Peach's castle.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the other is the XCOM. Apparently there is no, if it can work for fucking Toad and Donkey Kong, then there is no excuse for every game not to be XCOM.
I've been playing Captain Toad. That's a lovely little game. Do you know it?
I knew the first one, but there's a new one coming out, isn't there?
It is out. Well, it's this remake of the first one on on Switch, but it's like these little toy-like kind of three-dimensional levels, which you are Captain Toad or Toadette. Toadette, what a name! Anyway, they can't jump; they can only walk along.
That's where you draw the line.
They can only walk along flat surfaces, and these levels are basically puzzles about how to guide them to the exit, and you won't be moving platforms for them or timing things of the enemies to avoid. Really lovely little toy-like little kind of intricate little spaces that you've got to kind of puzzle boxes for you to kind of work out. Lovely.
I'm putting off the end of Zelda because I don't want it to be over. I just love being in the world so much and go back to it, but I'm just like, I'm going to have to just go and do it at some point and just say goodbye to the game. Because I know there's not going to be another one or anything like that for a long time.
Not for a long time.
Yeah, that's still a kind of once in a blue moon kind of thing, that game. We never did do that Breath of the Wild pod.
No,
it's a little bit late now. It's a bit late now, Alex. How fresh are your...
I can't remember anything about it.
Exactly.
What happens in it? Is there a wolf?
You get a horse. You get a lot of horses. You can...
Horse game.
Yeah, everyone in the world is a bit horny for Link. That's one of my main takeaways from Breath of the Wild. It's one of the things I find most charming about its writing of people. Is you go to like any town, and it's like, do you want to get my chickens? You know what I mean? There's apples outside. Constant.
The podcast isn't doing justice to your eyebrow movements there.
It's very
unrelentingly horny for Link.
Gonna have to get the World Serpent out after this.
Ooh, it's a bit, that's the spiced rum I wasn't ready for.
That's a band too far.
Yeah, exactly. We barely touched the Captain banter as well. I think in anything the branding changed has rather changed the nature of this experience. Also the fact that we were pre-drinking a little bit, doesn't help. Our next question comes from Charles. Charles writes, Dear Spikehorn and the Spire.
Ooh.
I like it.
Over the past few years, I've found myself going through periods of intense interest in and desire to play some game or another, thinking about it at work, finding little slivers of time at home to play, etc., followed by a sudden disinterest in the game. These periods are usually a couple of weeks to a couple of months long. It's happened with all kinds of games. Overwatch, Path of Exile, Stardew Valley, etc. I feel like this interest to disinterest cycle is messing up my enjoyment of games which are meant to be more long form, as I rarely finish long or deeper games before hitting the disinterest period. I remember a time in the past where I could enjoy longer games like The Elder Scrolls Oblivion at a more reasonable level and for a longer time, and I feel like I used to get more total joy from each game back then. My question is, have you ever experienced this sort of cyclical burnout? And if so, what do you do to mitigate it? Do you have any theories about why this might happen? And that's more than one question. Thanks for reading. And that's Charles. I also wanted to read a second question, because we actually had two questions this month that kind of touched on this subject, so I thought it would be good to read both of them, so we can answer them both at once. The other one comes from Henrik, who writes, Hello, Kreps and Croman. I have a problem. In the past, I played a bunch of story games. But nowadays, when I'm going to start a long story game, I think to myself, that takes too much time. Wouldn't it be more productive to play a roguelike or something and watch a TV series at the same time? So that's what I do. I play Spelunky, Dead Cells, WoW or Hearthstone and games like that don't require your full attention, and watch a TV series or YouTube clips at the same time. Now, my two questions. What can I do to break away from this kind of thinking? Because I love long story games and I really want to play them, but I'm having a hard time starting them. Also, have any of you had this or similar problems in your gaming career? Thanks for the great pod. So thank you both for your, Have you experienced this kind of burnout? Anybody?
Regularly, I think.
Over specific games, though, because his problem was he was playing a single game too intensely, right? And then,
or sort of like the game enters your sort of field of
it's like
enthusiasm.
Sort of big game. Like,
you're really into something for 2 weeks and then it's dead to you.
Yeah.
I don't have enough time to play games that intensely, so that doesn't usually happen to me. But
I have found that when this happens to me, it is usually because it's usually a sign that, like, I'm not actually really super enjoying. I don't want to, like, psychoanalyze it too much, but, like, there's something, like, I'm sort of just burning out on the thing because I'm not doing something else, if that makes sense. Like, I'm sort of playing something intensely because I'm avoiding something else, usually a life thing like work or something. And so Whereas, like, if I am just playing, basically it's the opposite side to what you just said, Marsh. Like, if I am playing a game for a few hours a day and just getting through it at my own pace and enjoying it, that's probably because I'm busy in other regards, which is probably a good thing, if that makes sense. I feel like, games at the moment kind of promote a bit of this sort of burnout thing when it's the only thing you do.
So maybe you should ration yourself. Is that the advice? You should.
I guess so.
But then, going to the second question, where they're talking about trying to maximize your time while playing games by playing games which are low brain power so you can actually do something else. I think I've heard a lot of anecdotes about people trying to do this with all kinds of mediums where, they'll watch a television program but be listening to a podcast on double speed at the same time. And there's just an overwhelming amount of media that you now feel in order to stay current, you need to consume all of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a terrible pressure. I think, you just have to make peace with the fact that you can't now really ever be fully expert in any medium, that you just need to let things go and maybe just pick and choose the things that you engage with and then try and treat them gently in some way.
Yeah, to make it feels like both cases could do sort of like it's basically pick that game, try not to be distracted by the massive Steam list, which I have a horrific Steam list of I tried favoriting some games I was desperate I really want to finish. And so they just remain at the top of the list, like shaming me every time I log in. And I'll play a chunk of game, think, oh, I'm really into this. And I think I think the solution for me would be just you're going to play this one game, blinker all the others. Let's think about that.
It's kind of what I started doing with Pillars of Eternity, where it's just I'll play an hour of this. This is my game. Yeah. I do think, I thought about this about my own sort of life recently, having a bit of a clear out, getting rid of, I think it's a healthy thing to do every now and then, which is get rid of every book you're never actually going to read or read again. Just get rid of it, because you might think you have all the edge cases of oh, but I fancy reading, whatever. But actually, the enjoyment you get from not having the stuff cluttering up your home is probably worth the £7 you might have to spend to buy that thing back should you ever actually want to read it.
Yeah.
And I feel that way. Today I was thinking, what can I clear out from our TV cabinet? Because I've got a big pile of PlayStation games. Things like Shadow of Mordor, that if I am realistic with myself, I keep thinking, I'll get back to that. I am going to die before I get back to the original Shadow of Mordor, right? I bought the DMC Devil May Cry Special Edition on PlayStation 4, a game I've already completed on Xbox 360 and PC. Do I need to own that? Does the kind of little tickling kind of thought of I was going to do it again on PS4. No, I'm not. Maybe that should go. You know what I mean? Just going through this process of actually what am I actually going to play and what
for download games. I was still thinking just deleting them works. You still own them. You can re-download them.
I recently deleted every single game of my PC and only reinstalled things when I wanted to play it. And that was a really good exercise.
But then I just started reinstalling stuff. It just hurt my internet connection.
It was annoying when my friends wanted to play Battlefield and it's 3 days later and 70 gig. But it was really worthwhile. Obviously, it saved a lot of hard disk space, which is kind of why I did it. But it really teaches you what do I actually click on. You know what I mean? Left to my own devices. And with the Steam library, I recently made a piece with my shame pile of Steam stuff where it's I'm just never going to play half of these. And obviously you can't unbuy them. Thanks, Steam. But it's I'm just not going to worry about it. I got that value of owning the thing, right? Some sort of super late capitalist kind of pleasure spike of bought that in a sale for £3. Turns out to be the sum total of the enjoyment I got from King's Bounty, the legend.
I do think a lot of very large games are conceptualized in chunks and then delivered to you in chunks. And actually, it's partly down to a lot of these games are structured poorly, and they're very good at linking the chunks together and giving you transitions between this big city bit and now you after the Skellige Isles in The Witcher 3, and this is a whole separate bit that's been designed almost on its own terms by a dedicated team. And sometimes the games don't do enough to bridge you, the player, between those things. So they provide you with these very, very easy jumping off points.
Yeah, right points.
Where it seems like a huge effort to embark upon the next fucking enormous gargantuan chunk of open world. And there's like, you don't have to do the linear 1 island, 2 island, 3 island structure. You can actually flip, you could build a story that goes between these things and actually nests you with stories of both places. And what Yakuza, for example, does very, very well is that you are playing as 2 different characters, and it interleaves their sections so that you're jumping from Majima to Kiryu and then back to Majima, and each time each story develops the other story at the same time. So it's all nested together, and there are no jumping off points at all, even though you're taking fairly regular scene changes. So,
and they're like evenings length time, the chapters, aren't they?
And it gives you like a previously on when you come back to the character as well.
Oh, that's cool.
And it introduces things like, you could start donating money in set chunks between the characters to build each other's businesses. The two things are mechanically entwined in a way that makes playing through it seamless. There's no places where, oh god, a whole new fucking thing has just opened up and I can't be fucked. And actually loads of big games are very bad for just overloading the player in those moments.
Maybe related to that is that feeding that compulsion to just munch through games as intensely as possible is that obviously there's a skill requirement, and then if you leave a game for a few days, then at least I have completely erased any information I had about how to operate the controller or the keyboard.
Just chewing on it fruitlessly.
So maybe if games had more sort of, I don't know how they would work it out. Maybe they check your Steam account and see if you've not been playing it for, like 72 hours, then they lower the difficulty level, give you a few more button prompts again or something. To get you back into it.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe, I wander away from the question too much, but, for me, I've always found that, that kind of quick burnout thing is a symptom of something else with playing games. It's if nothing is kind of, grabbing you for long enough to really enjoy playing it, then I don't know if that's a sign of, not an unhealthy engagement with it, but, a sort of rapid cycling sort of...
I think it's easy to be sort of distracted by the latest thing that just got released, and especially in this age of kind of good quality free-to-play games, there's always something that can claim your time.
I think that's the thing.
Or your friends are saying, let's play Fortnite.
It's...
Also, some games, their stories are bigger than the game. Then the mechanical progression of the game can be a lot shorter than the actual story they're trying to tell. And you get this terrible thing where the combat systems are stretched out for dozens and dozens of hours past their breaking point, really. And that again is, a lot of these jumping off points happen when you feel as though you've completed the mechanical arc, but there's still for some reason fucking loads of story left to tell and to absorb. At that point, you might as well watch a film.
I think it's weird. I think it's quite hard in some ways. Honestly, I was quite close to saying might as well watch a film for a lot of this stuff. I think it's in some ways quite hard to make a hobby of games. Not that lots of people don't, but there are lots of them, and they're massive, and a lot of them are quite unreasonable with how they use your time or how much of your time they require. So that kind of, and they make you feel guilty about burning out, because a lot of, maybe my thesis, episode 249, the games were bad. But I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the amount of effort you put in for the return, and it depends what you're looking for, but you're right, Tom, you do burn out on mechanics after a while, or you just have your fill of them. It's you can have enjoyed as many Dark Souls boss fights as you're ever going to enjoy, and that's a very good game, and not see the end of Dark Souls.
But I think that's slightly different question to what I think this one is more about the game that you were into, and suddenly, I've lost it.
But what I'm saying is those things are related, and not to read too much into the question, but the thing that prompts this question is I feel guilty for not sticking with games, and I guess what I'm saying is, should you? Because everyone understands that if you watch a film for tops 3 hours, they will let you see the ending. If you read a book all the way to the end, they will let you see what happens in the story. That's part of the deal. I remember playing Batman Arkham Knight all the way to the ending. That's a 40-hour, 50-hour game at the best of times. And then it says, you've got to 100% it if you want to see the ending. And I quit, and I watched the ending on YouTube, which is something I never do, because I used to be a real completionist about this kind of thing. Because it's that's really unreasonable. There's absolutely no justification for that. It's I'm not going to do that. You're asking for far more of my time than I want to give. And games make this mistake all the time. But weirdly, the kind of culture of what games kind of, because of the challenge and the completionist kind of thing, you're at fault if you stop. It's your attention span that is flawed. You know what I mean? Rather than it being you know, we're not good enough at saying this game's good for 12 hours, then you just stop playing it. Which is, if we did talk about that more, that would be so much more accurate to the vast majority of people's experience of playing games, which is, I picked up Assassin's Creed, I played it for 12 hours, I quite liked it, then I traded it in. You know? Like, you can see this from achievement stats, like most people know this. It still works as a business model, but it's not necessarily good as a creative model. Yeah. Because, you know, whichever Ubisoft studio makes the last zone in any Assassin's Creed game has just been doing beautiful paintings for 2% of people who buy the thing to see.
And also the last part of Assassin's Creed Origins, which is just set entirely in a plain white box.
That's probably why.
It's just like, it's like wolves that randomly spawn and nothing else.
I bet that's why. I bet that's the explanation.
The intern did this.
It's the explanation for the ending of Assassin's Creed 2, which is like, no one's going to see this, so we can just do whatever the fuck we want.
I'm so glad I did see it, though.
Puncher.
That was a good moment. That's a very good moment.
The devs seems pissing themselves about that. Nobody's going to see this.
No one's going to get through Florence.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? I don't want to flip things on the head too much, but yeah. I think if you're bored, do something else.
Yeah.
Emphatic nodding there from Marsh. Next up, The Light writes, "Hi, Renaissance and Revolution. Games used to have just 2 dimensions. After a while, some started to use 3 dimensions. What I'm invested in is the 4th dimension. Time. What games have you played that make the best use of time, places that seem like they have a history, or people who seem like they have a past? Thanks for reading, everybody. Valike." Or Valake.
What's that? There's a noise. It looks quite low.
Oh no. Oh no.
What is this haunting tune? Yeah, going over the breeze.
Whistling through the woodwind instrument that dangles to greet us.
I can't hear anymore.
Toot toot. It's Dark Souls, everybody.
Alex, have you noticed that loads of games are like Dark Souls?
Isn't it weird?
It's weird how it's like that, isn't it? It's really strange. Man.
Are games like Dark Souls, or is Dark Souls like games?
Ooh. Well, there you go. We've mentioned Dark Souls like 10 times in this
episode. It's like, I think fundamentally it's like Castlevania came up a weird number of times. And what is Castlevania but a 2D Dark Souls?
What is man but a
miserable pile of Dark Souls? What is a flute but a thin tree with something to say? You say anything, Alex. It's just words, isn't it? Dark Souls, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's got a rich sense of history. That's a game where the world feels like it's there a while.
History. The world that has been there for a while.
Of being there a while.
I say Anno Londo, which is a kind of layered reality from 2 different time zones, is a great execution of Dark Souls' whole deal.
That 6 Ages game, you played?
Yep.
It's on phones, but it's coming to PC. That's got a whole lot of lore in it. A whole lot of lore.
Well, it's based on Golgotha.
I have no idea what it's actually based on.
It's a RPG world that was developed in the 1960s, I think.
Really?
Very rich, and it was based originally as a kind of experiment in building myths as they are in the real world.
Because, I mean, that's the thing that's striking about it. It doesn't read like lore from, one of the Bethesda studios or something like that. It feels very kind of mythic and very unreliable. And in fact, the unreliability of it is a gameplay mechanic, because in certain points you need to perform rituals in order to gain the favour of gods. And performing rituals involves recreating scenes from myth. But the way those scenes may have been handed down to you may be flawed, or your interpretation of them may be flawed, and so you can accidentally enrage your gods. Or lose a possessed tapestry man in your village, and then offend your elders.
I got a reign of land praise.
How do I unoffend my ancestors? It wasn't my fault, the fucking possessed tapestry man wandering off.
So, hang on. When you say tapestry man, do you mean like a bloke just wandered off the bio tapestry and...
Yeah, he was presumably a depiction of an ancestor of mine on the tapestry in my tent, and he came to life, and I chose poorly, obviously. I thought he was looking for his pots. I thought, why not, man? Why not let a man find his pots? But it turns out the village had moved, so he couldn't find his pots, and then he blew away in the wind, and everybody was really angry.
And I was very, very drunk.
Yeah. Like that, yeah, that world has actual magic things, and like it's like I think the other thing it was trying to be was not Tolkienistic.
Yeah.
Tokenistic. So like
Tolkienistic.
it has dwarves, but they're made of stone. And it has trolley things, but they're kind of
4 wheeled outside Sainsbury's.
It's really good. I mean, most of the
Put a quid in them. Pops back out and you plug him into a different one.
It's got a real nice text of the game because most of your interactions are with other tribes, and it's kind of politicking and managing your own tribe and then foraging and stuff like that. But then you do have representations of gods and spirits that you need to pay homage to. It's really good.
yeah.
It's completely impenetrable to me. I have no idea how to unoffend my ancestors now. Maybe I never will.
Say sorry. You don't say sorry much in life. Maybe
True.
start.
There's a sorry button. I'd be hammering.
It's good level in Dishonored 2 where you hold up kind of shard of glass and peer into the past.
Ooh, that's a very good use.
Place.
Yeah.
Likewise, Titanfall 2 has a level which does something quite similar.
Oh yeah.
Where you're
Yeah.
through portals between the same place in 2 different time zones. I also love time skips in games, stuff like Fable 2 I think did it, where it's a generational skip that then sort of pays off some stuff that you did in the first act.
I'm not sure that it was actually any good, but the Eternal Darkness,
Oh, I like
That's great.
which I was it great? I just don't know.
I
didn't
very
know.
much remember it being great.
I enjoyed it, and what I really liked about it, there was a cathedral which you visit in 3 very different times. So you visit it first in the medieval times, and you visit it during the First World War. I think there might be a third visit. I can't remember.
Yeah, it might be
and
one
it's in very different shapes and kind of states in between them.
Yeah,
and I really loved the opportunity to visit a space in 3 different times, but very different
You do a
cultures.
few different. There's one where you visit this sort of Middle Eastern temple complex in antiquity, and then again as a soldier in the Gulf War who just sort of falls through the ground during a battle and finds themselves in this underground underground tunnel, which is such a neat idea. And yes, I think you encounter the corpse of previous characters. I
think you might have been a fireman actually.
But it was like a war fireman.
Warman. Fireman.
Fireman.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah.
I hope it is a good game.
I think it was. I think it was. Wasn't that
Silicon Knights?
Silicon Knights, yeah. Because also that uses that device at the very end as well. The last battle takes place with everybody, right? Like, minor spoilers for...
I finished it, but I can't
Eternal
remember
Darkness.
I'm in the middle of finishing it.
But yeah, at the end, I'm a big sucker for ensemble endings more than anything else. Like the everybody kind of musical theatre impulse to kind of drag every character back at once at the ending. Like the It's a Wonderful Life thing. And yeah, at the end of that game is basically It's a Wonderful Life, but instead of...
it's all the different characters you've played.
Yeah, instead of the entire town of people whose lives would be worse if you didn't exist, it's everybody who's died fighting a big lobster.
Okay.
I think it's pretty much answered the question.
I think so. Real sense of history. I mean, obviously, also the hub level in that game is the mansion that you encounter in a bunch of different eras.
Do you?
Yeah, because you see it as, because you inherit it at the start from your uncle, spooky uncle who's died, and then later you play as him, but like as a slightly, I think it's him or his dad, like as a frail man living in the house. It's such a great level, being hunted by an invisible Lovecraftian horror. And you've got to do all these kind of Resident Evil style kind of survival things and puzzles in the house while this thing is hunting you. And it's completely invisible. And you're armed with an elephant gun where if you ever fire it, you fall on your ass. And it's such a good idea. It's such a good idea.
You knock down your foe, but you get knocked down.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
so you just start where
you scare it off. Like you scare it off,
Right.
but if you fire and you miss, you're completely fucked because you've just because you're too old to fire your massive gun. What a great game. Next question comes from Dear Slate and Willowbark, inspired by Pip's lovely embroidery on Instagram, a compliment that I'll pass on, which game has the best craft work? By which I mean making useful, interesting and or beautiful things in a way that you can influence. Keep podding the pod. It's dead good. Cheers, Daniel.
Has Kraftwerk been in a game?
We think that Kraftwerk, the band...
The pocket calculator.
Yeah. May have been in Grand Theft Auto.
I have a feeling it was on the soundtrack of something.
Maybe Vice City?
Even like in a show. I don't know if this is just a fever dream I had, but I vaguely remember them appearing in digital form in a video game. I wonder if it was in like the Ballad of Gay Tony or something like that.
Yeah, or Vice City maybe.
Yeah, I think that would have been.
Can I Google this?
Yeah.
Has Kraftwerk ever been in a video game?
Yeah.
But meanwhile, actually answering the question,
yeah,
it's a huge frustration that a lot of games that have crafting mini games in them, or don't really have any way of gauging the aesthetic qualities of the thing that you produce. So don't encourage you to produce beautiful things. And even the games, there was a game, wasn't there, like where you play a French painter? Was there something?
Oh, there was, yeah.
But it didn't matter what you drew.
No.
That's a bit of a shame.
Dicks.
I find the same thing with any spelling games. It really annoys me that there's no spelling games which reward you for making beautiful words.
Well, surely you have to spell the word they're giving you. You can't just be like, Celador. Celador.
No, I think games like Bookworm Adventures where you get like a bunch of tiles.
Oh, I see, like Scrabble games kind of thing.
Scrabble
games,
yeah.
Exactly.
And
well, that's my frustration with Scrabble.
Yes,
it's like you haven't made a fun joke out of the previous word. It doesn't match semantically. It's not like a theme is emerging. It's just, did you write Xylil? I hate Scrabble. That's my,
It's a terrible, terrible game. It ruins language.
It does, yeah.
One of the Bookworm Adventures almost did it by giving you extra points if you wrote a word which was thematically linked to the environment you're fighting in. But on the Greek level, I spelt the word Minotaur and it didn't accept it. So fuck Bookworm.
And fuck that little worm in particular. Fuck that guy. What's his fucking name? Bookie the Bookworm.
I believe that Kraftwerk's music has only been used in one game, and that is Wipeout HD, and it was a remix of Aerodynamic.
Interesting. Thank you, Alex. That's it. That's the only known usage of Kraftwerk in a video game. Fantastic. What were we talking? I was angry about the Bookworm Adventures. Worm. And not anymore. Yeah, but you've reminded me how much that guy frustrated me with his little bow tie.
Yeah.
Maybe the only good example of this is the Spore creature creator that you would then upload to a database that people could rate. And you would be rewarded through social currency for a beautiful creation.
I think The Sims 4 does this because you can make houses and share them and people can download your houses. And again, it's simply a do your peers like the thing. But there's genuine skill because those tools are pretty good for like understanding how a house is nicely laid out and what kind of colours go together. It's not, necessarily like full on, craftsmanship, but there's an element of like, I'm really good at this, I suppose, if we're getting in that direction, then modding.
Or Minecraft, or Roblox or whatever, or any game where you can actually fully create things and share them is.
Opus Magnum is a really good example.
Oh yeah, that is a very good example, because that's quite tightly related to the mechanics as well.
Yeah. And it also, it measures efficiency and success rate. Like it has a few different metrics by which it analyzes a puzzle. Yeah. And a very overly complicated multi-stage puzzle can be really beautiful, and you could share that in a GIF, and that's actually really nice.
Factorio, or any of those style games where you're creating beautiful machines. I think that's
probably as close as it gets.
I suppose there's, to link it back to the embroidery thing, there's something sort of about the kind of your ability to conceive the kind of process by which something will be achieved, not just kind of add ornamentation to something till it's nice, which is the good answer. Our next and final question comes from Steve, who writes, "Hi, Craft and Crossbow." Ooh, a little thematic link here. Back in the days of AOL, I played a fantasy-style MUD with an extremely intricate systems and more granular details than I've ever experienced in a game before or since. The most intricate systems were if you wanted to craft your own materials rather than buy them. If you were like me and wanted to become a master fletcher, here are the tools and components you would need to make a single arrow, a knife, skinning or carving, a wood shaper, feather flights, flight shears, flight glue, an arrowhead, different types inflicting different damage, a stick of your desired wood type, 26 varieties, each with various workability characteristics. Once you assembled your various tools, it took 17 discrete steps to go from raw materials to a finished product. If you wanted a full quiver, start all over again. Imagine my surprise when people touted the exciting nature of World of Warcraft's crafting system, only to find out that making an iron sword consisted of acquiring a raw material and watching a bar fill up for 15 seconds. And so my question, has there ever been a game you played that had a design choice or system that was so far ahead of its time with what it was doing that you didn't even know it was outstanding until years later when you found other games touting revolutions in that area that were utterly disappointing? Don't glue your flights together, Steve.
Oh, Steve. Champion of what sounds like my hell game. I never want to do any crafting in any game ever again. I don't want to have to punch a tree more than once. I want to get near a tree.
Just once so it knows. And it'll tell its friends. Yeah. And then you don't have a problem.
Then
you get in a forest, punch the biggest tree. Then you shouldn't have a problem.
Yeah. Perfect. That's the solution. But as to things that are ahead of their time, any examples?
Well, Elite would be probably mine because I played it like as a completely unknowing sort of 10-year-old in 1985 or 6 on a BBC, not knowing that it was in any way sort of special, that you were in the universe, and a huge, great universe, and able to travel anywhere you like and play it in the way you wanted to, and the game wasn't going to guide you or kind of make you play it in any particular way. And I just played it. I got stuck. Basically, I didn't know really what to do in it. I was no good at the numbers involved in trading or anything, and couldn't really afford much, and I was no good at docking. But like, I liked the fact that it was 3D and stuff, and I liked that I could just sort of have fights with the police outside the space station, and I was completely blissfully unaware that like it kickstarted a kind of a whole movement which people would celebrate like on about 20 years later, you know.
Like, I wonder to what extent this is almost like the opposite of the phenomenon we were describing, when people just sort of like burn out on an excellent, very immediate game and bounce on to the next one, which is that we probably all have memories of games we played when we were younger where it's like, this is the only game I have to play, so I am going to engage with it completely.
Yeah.
And I am going to fucking, you know, it's functioning like giving a child a piece of granite and saying, carve your fun out of this. Like, because this game will do everything, but it doesn't need to, it just is.
Yeah.
Like, what you want when you play Elite is to be Han Solo. But you're not really. You're like, obviously, you know, Elite has its charms, I'm not denying that, but like, as a kid playing those things, you really are working super hard and buying into the idea that all of that additional sort of realism and granularity is necessary in order to furnish the fantasy you want. And that belief that granularity is necessary to furnish the fantasy you want, or even have time to experience, still powers Star Citizen and a dozen other things. I just have my doubts about whether it's necessary, you know, whether people just don't actually want a shortcut to that experience. Maybe that's questioning the premise of the question too much, but like, I don't see a system that's necessarily more granular or more complicated is necessarily just more advanced, right?
Most of the time, those systems appear to be in games to slow people down, like, you know, to make you walk from there to there, to kind of like make sure that you can't instantly have your arrows to sell, or what you're going to do with them, fire them, whatever. It's there to slow you down. Like in a mud, I imagine, like even an older mud, they were probably just sort of like, got to slow these players down, like, you know, just make sure they've got something to return for, and, you know, to give them something to do.
Or it comes from a sort of simulationist desire to really which I get, but like, it's really notable. Like, I've been for various reasons reading a bunch of sort of 80s era pen and paper role playing source books recently, and you know, I think those game designers learned after a couple of decades there's a degree of granularity that not only isn't necessary, but no one was really using even then. Because, you know, most of these systems stem from a pen and paper background, particularly in video games, particularly from sort of 80s MUDs, for example, where there really is a desire to digitize experience people having around tabletop. Difference with a digital game is that you can't house rules things. When players around a pen and paper table decide none of us are enjoying the reagent system, for casting spells. We'll just won't have that in our campaign. We'll just ignore it. And, therefore pages 78 through 81 of the rule book will just pretend don't exist. You don't have that option. They just sort of are.
There's a really good article on PC Gamer at the moment about how the new chaperones of Vampire the Masquerade have streamlined a lot of the kind of more boring granular systems of the early games.
Yeah. Because you kind of have to. And people always have. That's the thing. It's not like modern dumbing down or anything. It's like people have always gone, I don't really like this system. But obviously someone felt compelled to implement it for sort of philosophical reasons more than anything else. It's like you really should know what the wood penetration value is of this pistol.
I mean, there's certainly a pleasure in kind of like a very tight granularity, like this sort of the one in, I always forget the name of it, the one where it models a gun and you've got to kind of like, build the gun and reload it. And
begins with R.
Receiver.
Like when it sort of zooms right into one thing, like which is not the mud or the
crazy
World of Warcraft
fetishization almost rather than simulation.
But like, the version of that applied to a sort of like classic pen and paper RPG would be, it's Deus Ex, but every system is like that. Like you use a computer and you're like, having to you got to install the RAM first. Like,
but when it's focused on a thing, like, where you're not having to kind of also wander around the city and have conversations with people where you're just going to the computer and then, the computer is all you're doing, that's fine.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. But I think, I don't know if we've gotten too far off the question necessarily.
We probably have.
Because the question kind of presupposes that a crafting system that detailed is simply better than World of Warcraft's system. I don't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah. So maybe the question is more about systems that are better.
That's what.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's definitely something to say like about the fact that there are things that certainly I'd frame it a different way. I think there are things that can be lost over time. And I think one of the appeals of MUDs is granularity because it's text-based. Like I work on a MUD and this is a huge benefit to us on HackMud of like what you can do with text. Because you're not, you can have an idea that you would be very difficult to execute in any other way and just simply stick it in. And if people like it, it can become a system, that kind of thing. And when whole sort of genres like that go out of favor, so things can certainly be lost. There's, it'd be certainly fair to say that, and I'd be the first person to agree that the WoW era, made it harder to make games with that kind of old MUD kind of simulationist thing. And I'm not saying that one should simply replace the other. And I think for a while there was a danger that they would to some extent.
The kind of niche outliers like Worm Online.
Yeah, true.
And stuff like that they've kind of picked to the battle. And they've always been niche concerns, that sort of game. I think that, few games have capitalized on the standoffish relationship between the player and their NPC subjects that you see in Dungeon Keeper and Theme Hospital and Populous, and that whole strata of games that are about managing an environment and then AIs operate within that in interesting ways.
So you're manipulating their behaviour by your
not directly.
You
can pick imps up and drop them down, but a Wilding will still eat them if they feel like it's so inclined to. Like the idea that you're running in a place, but everything in there has its own personality and will interact according to its behaviours. Those ideas seem to have dead-ended or died with Bullfrog, really. And all we see now are very nostalgic copies that aren't as good as the originals. So we'll see what 2 Point Hospital is like. I mean, that seems to be like a good one. But attempts to remake Dungeon Keeper and things like that have never understood or capitalized on what made those systems really interesting as a player. So that feels like an example.
Also, I think there's an element of like tone there that like there's a sort of that generation of management games that sort of takes as their guiding principle. And this is related that like management is inherently a bit silly. Like, you know what I mean? Not that like it's sort of like a serious thing that you're trying to get right, more that like it's crisis management more than anything else. It's like you're a sort of incompetent catastrophe wrangler rather than someone trying to build a Factorio style kind of flawless system.
Yeah.
That
always has, it's a great way to express personality in a game when the NPCs you're interacting with, you ostensibly are supposed to have control of them in some way, but actually they rebel against you directly. And often, like what would happen in Dungeon Keeper was great because like the Horned Reaper was the ultimate combat character, but he would piss off everyone around him because he was such a dick that even the most disgusting creatures from hell, the warlocks and everyone else would hate him. And in Dungeon Keeper 2, you'd have to box him up in his own palace. You have to build like a palace just for the Horned Reaper because otherwise he's just going to fucking get to fights with everyone all the time. The flies and the spiders would eat the flies, so they couldn't coexist. So you had to have, separate habitations for them. And you're managing this kind of I mean, it just implies so much about those creatures' lives, just to have those conflicts breaking out in your dungeon, having to kind of, as you say, firefight that stuff. And that, it feels like such a rich thing that could be, experimented with and developed, but never has been really.
Yeah, I feel like no game has managed to make sustainable a kind of like MMO. I don't know, maybe it worked with the Elder Scrolls, I don't know. But like there was a sort of, my kind of golden era of playing MMOs was around Dark Age of Camelot and Star Wars Galaxies and things, where territory really felt meaningful, and Eve has definitely done this. But it feels like the move towards sort of battleground style PvP modes and arena style PvP modes kind of like ended the era of like territory capture and holding, and kind of players kind of living in spaces in MMOs that I feel like, not things necessarily went backwards, but like whatever and I wouldn't necessarily, I think I understand that a lot of developers moved on from those ideas while working on more modern games, but it does feel like those ideas never really escaped a particular moment, and I don't know whether to put their success at a given time to the way online games were consumed in the noughties or the early noughties versus now. But it's that certainly thing where if someone pulled that off now, it'd be the best thing ever, and just doesn't seem to exist. PlanetSide, right? Like I can't really imagine someone coming out with PlanetSide now and it working, which is kind of interesting because that's an idea that I think is still very compelling, but certainly kind of locked in its time. Thank you for that little noise, Marty.
No problem. You can have another one if you like.
Lovely. That is all of the questions we've got time for.
All of the Captain Bants.
That's all the Captain Bants. We actually only had half the Captain Bants.
Captain Bants.
Yeah.
Two bants for me.
If you'd like to send us some bants for a future bantersode, you can do so by bant mailing us. Questions at crateandcrowbar.com. In it, you can tweet us at Crate and Crowbar. You can hang out with our Discord community on Discord. Link for that is on our website. Look for the word Discord in the navigation menu, then click it with your mouse pointer. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar, and many thanks to our Patreon backers who make all of these bants possible, for better or for worse. And if you'd like to find us on Twitter as individuals, I'm at C Thurston. That's CTHURSTEN.
I'm Marsh Davis. That's DAVIES.
Nice.
I'm Rotational. ROTATIONAL.
Nice.
I'm Tom Senior, and I'm at PCG Ludo, which is Ludo.
Lovely.
Lovely.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Hey!